But ultimately, what I always wanted, which I can speak for the entire human race, is connection. We all just want connection. And I just had equated drinking to getting a little bit of what I thought was genuine connection, because in my mind, I thought, well, when people drink, they're uninhibited and they let go more and they're more open. So whatever you're showing me is your true self, and whatever I'm showing you is my true self. And this is
there is a certain bond that occurs. Yeah.
If you remember it.
Welcome to Modo di Bere, the podcast about local drinks and local sayings. I'm your host, Rose Thomas Bannister. I'm so happy to introduce today's guest, Abe Zarate, known on the internet as the Sober Somm. Abe has worked as a sommelier with top wine programs in New York City at the Modern and Contento. He was recognized as one of 40 top tastemakers in 2024 by Wine Enthusiast magazine. Abe promotes inclusivity and hospitality by working with the nonprofit Wine on Wheels, by co-leading an English as a second language program for restaurant workers, and by speaking openly about his experiences as a beverage professional who does not consume alcohol. Abe, welcome.
Hi, Rose.
Before we start the interview, I want to remind you that Modo di Bere is a listener-supported program. Please take a moment to visit patreon.com/MODODIBERE to learn more about the exclusive educational content that you'll unlock when you become a paid supporter of the show. Abe and I will be here when you get back. Abe, the last time we were together, we were at Sam Bale's Sober Supper Club, and we both got interviewed for CBS News.
Yes. Yeah.
Big thanks to Sam Bale, your fellow podcast guest from Season 2, Episode 11. Sam puts on non-alcoholic events around New York City through Third Place Bar. Sam really puts the celebration into sobriety. So that news segment is airing on CBS on January 11th from 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And pretty recently, deciding not to drink alcohol felt like a life sentence if getting offered coffee, Coca-Cola, or orange juice. Abe, you said something on CBS News you said something to CBS News about making everyone feel included when they're raising a glass in a toast. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal choice. And I probably said that this country and world in general has such a problem with choice. This is such a microcosm of it all, but just as important because it's a reflection of how we all operate. You know, I have very specific faces and reactions whenever I've brought over a non-alcoholic option, whenever I know someone's celebrating, or, you know, I'm splashing with bubbles, which I love to do, you know, always lead with generosity. And they just turn to me, and it's so easy really to make someone feel not just special, but just included in an experience that at that point, it's kind of like, why not? Why wouldn't you have something, you know?
How does it work for you being a sober sommelier?
The logistics of it is, it's the exact same as when I did ingest alcohol, which is sometimes you taste at 8 a.m. So you can imagine, even if you do consume alcohol, you're not swallowing every sip. So I would spit in those occasions, but the only difference is now I spit every time. You know, I make sure that I have my own, before even taking a sip to taste, that there's either a sink or I have a little cup of I was going to say recipient because that's how you say it in Spanish.
Receptacle.
Yeah. Or if you're visiting a vineyard, just, you know, the land is your spit cup. Everything else has been a process of reframing and rewiring, kind of pointed towards this concept of neuroplasticity. And not to get too scientific, because I wouldn't even know how to really relay that information. It's a process in which you are able to rewire your brain to change your behaviors and habits and just think about things differently. You only know what you know, so it's kind of repositioning your lenses, so you create a new reality. And in this new reality, I no longer have an alcohol disorder.
But you still got to keep your job.
Yes. Yeah.
So you didn't have to change that. You have discovered.
Yeah.
Did you think you were going to have to quit
in the wine
Yeah,
business
and
when you wanted to quit drinking?
I was ready for it. It sounds silly, but I was watching an Ellen Pompeo interview at some point where she talked about asking for 20 million a season or something like that. Grey's Anatomy, I don't know if you know the actress, but she said that when she went into the meeting, she was ready to walk away. And I made sure that I was ready to walk away from an industry that has given me, continues to give me so much, not least of which is a community. And so alcohol was just such a tiny part of it, really, that I didn't want to leave it. But again, I was very much ready to walk away. And I think that's why, not the only reason, but that's a large part of why it's become sustainable.
You know, I want to tell you something, which is I was about to walk away too. In late 2023, I was feeling a lot of general burnout. And before pivoting to writing and education from hospitality and sales, which is really, I think, a better fit for me all along. Not that I didn't have a great time, doing those other jobs, which I did for a long time. But, part of it was just the taxing nature of this culture of where there was just a lot of drinking, and it was just kind of wearing me down. One of the first things I did during the lockdown was I just stopped drinking completely because I didn't have to for work. And it's so weird because, when you're in these kind of sexy food and wine jobs, it's like, oh, poor you get to drink free alcohol all day. And I'm like, yes.
No, it's tiring.
I'm expected to drink alcohol all day.
Yeah.
I don't know. It took me a long time to get to a point where, I'm not drinking every day and like moderating isn't that hard. I'd always found actually that not drinking at all was a lot easier than moderating, which I think a lot of people have had that experience.
It's weird. For some it is. For me, it kind of is, especially now. It's been almost 4.5 years, but I also live with my sister who has no issue moderating. I have a ton of friends who have no issue moderating. So I see it everywhere. And that's why I think of and I'm not the first one to bring up this analogy, but as an allergy, it's just you take a gluten allergy, there's an intolerance, and then there's celiac disease. So I'm somewhere in the middle, closer to celiac, where I just said it would be a slow, not that slow, but a slow burn into something that's not beneficial to my well-being. Yeah, you just have to make those decisions. It's if you have an allergy to shellfish, you're not gonna expose yourself.
At the time I'm describing, I was also having some digestive issues. And I was wondering if it was gluten. I think it might have been alcohol, actually.
Yeah.
yeah. Both at the same time. So it was kind of hard to tell.
It's true.
Although I don't drink that much anymore, or I don't drink every day. And what is your Instagram handle? It's
sober_som.
Okay, sober_som.
Because sober sommelier was taken.
You know what? I think it was taken by me.
Really?
Yeah, and depending on the time frame. Okay. Because I actually made a second account.
Really?
And
wow.
I thought about doing something like what you're doing, at least publicly. I was like, could I pivot? Yeah. And that was the thing that I did. I didn't put anything on it.
Oh, wow.
I knew that I wasn't sure about, I was going to take an extended time off. I was thinking a year. This was in 2024. So I hadn't been drinking for about 3 months. And then I got invited to judge a wine competition in Italy. I was also thinking about just changing careers completely. But I wasn't happy about that. I had asked myself, well, why don't you just get a different job like the ones you've had? And I had to admit that I didn't want to. That I was like, well, what would you have done with your sommelier certification all along if there were no limits? And I was like, I would be a writer. And I was like, oh, that sounds too hard. We tried that. That's why you went and got a J-job in restaurants in the first place, blah, blah, blah. I was feeling very closed-minded and also not drinking and not eating gluten. So then I get invited to Italy. But I was just like, this is me right now. And I'm going to go to Italy, judge a wine competition, and eat without drinking or eating wheat. And I did it. And you know what? It was not a big deal.
Really? I'm more impressed by no gluten in Italy.
Well, I mean, this is a whole other story, but it's actually really easy to be gluten-free in Italy. They want to make sure everybody can eat. They have a lot of celiacs there, but also Italian cuisine is so much more than pasta. Yeah. And the cuisine is such simple, straightforward ingredients that there aren't hidden ingredients. So there's always something for you to eat, and actually people are amazing. And that's what I learned. So I guess what I want to talk to you is, kind of your transitionary process with openly communicating at this, people's reactions. What I discovered is, A, it was fine. B, when I finally spoke up about my needs, I discovered things like the chef at my favorite pizza restaurant in Brooklyn, which I guess is Barano. They have great pizza. Yeah. It's in Williamsburg. The chef has an allergy, and he had a secret gluten-free menu.
That is awesome.
Now it's public, but he just had it. And he could have been making me food that didn't make me feel bloated or whatever.
for years if I had just said something.
Yeah.
And when you bring up these things, then people, the positive side is that people are like, oh, yeah, me too, or I have this, or I'm allergic to green bell peppers. It kind of opens up the door.
And his job is not dissimilar to what I just said earlier. It's just
gluten-free
because
pizza chef, right?
It's the exact same thing, if anything. I mean, I don't know his health or what actual issues he would develop, but it's the same thing. That doesn't mean he's not able to cook those pizzas or able to provide the actual more than the meal, which is hospitality. That's what we're in the business of. And I've said it a lot before. Hospitality doesn't just belong in restaurants. Some of the best places outside of restaurants that I've loved working at are the places where I clock hospitality right away. And that's such an important thing to kind of shift the focus to as well. It's just that shifting your focus to what matters, what you want to stay, in this case, in the industry for.
Yeah, I mean, so just to like wrap that up, and we've talked about the story of how I came up with the idea for this project before, but I was around a bunch of people who were also wine judges who had some kind of entrepreneurial or creative project. I opened my mind a little bit more, but I also showed myself that I could taste 80 wines a day without taking a single sip, and it was fine. It wasn't just fine, it was great. I had more stamina. I was more present. I was a better taster. I've been a big advocating for spitting all along. Like, it's just kind of a rookie move to not spit. It's like, oh, you've been here for 20 minutes and now you have to go home.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay here and continue to learn. I ended up staying in wine. I didn't continue to drink, but it was more like I drink for work. One of the ways that I'm able to do that is because of all these wonderful non-alcoholic products that do exist now. I do a lot of swapping out. Whereas before it was like, okay, there would be this aperitivo hour and this Amaro and all this wine in between. I'm going to have a non-alcoholic beer and, swap out some other things.
Yeah.
And I'm going to save what drinking I do want to do for this wine that I really want to try. But I'm not just going to be like, oh, Dive Bar Sauvignon Blanc. Okay. So I think it's actually really improved the quality of my drinking experience.
It's drinking better, whatever that means to any person. It's doesn't mean more expensive, doesn't mean less expensive, doesn't mean consuming more or less. It's just whatever better means to you, whatever will enhance that experience. That's it. And you keep saying words that I go back to a lot, like swap, like habit swap. Habits don't die. Understanding that you need to swap it out. If I like to have a drink in my hand, then okay, well, when I'm commuting, I'm holding a coffee. When I'm getting home after a busy service, I like to sink into my couch with another drink in my hand. So even tonic water, bitters, the simplest of things, a fancy wine glass, just something that kind of makes it feel like an experience versus what I'm actually ingesting. That's more impactful than any liquid in the receptacle.
What is your shift drink these days?
Shift
drink being your after work couch drink.
At home, because I rarely spend extra time at work now. Tonic water, honestly, because it's the simplest, and I still consume bitters and non-alcoholic bitters. All the bitters are great products that I really, really love, and they have, a similar-ish background, being sommeliers as well.
Which company is that?
All the Bitter.
All the Bitter. Yeah. All the Bitter. So on the flip side, I talked about having positive experiences, talking about changing what I was ingesting at different times. I mean, then when you start drinking again, you worry about disappointing people, for me. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, oh, sorry. I just want to say thank you, Chu, for just talking about this, because you could have easily become the sober som without becoming the sober som. Before I made those changes that I just described, I found it personally to be a bit lonely as a beverage professional who decided at a certain point that I wanted to drink less. You would think that industry people would talk all the time about how to find balance when we're dealing with the substance in our work. But in my experience, nobody talks about it. And I experienced in the past drinking in the beverage industry as a sort of machismo where you silently try to keep up with everybody else's drinking. And if it gets too much for you, you just kind of disappear. And then there must have been something wrong with you.
Yes. Yeah, you couldn't hang.
In breaking that silence, I find that, like for you, to have to explain that you're a sommelier who doesn't drink, do you find that people can react really emotionally or become defensive or apologetic? Or what range of emotional reactions do you get from explaining who you are? And how have you responded to that over time?
It's the entire range of responses, anywhere from, let's say, a job interview where I don't really know the person very well and I bring it up in my own way. They, for some reason, feel, for the most part, the need to tell me about their drinking habits, kind of saying, well, I don't drink that much either way. And I'm like, that's cool. That's great. I'm just saying this is, how I work it out and the line that I like to toe. Maybe sprinkle in for me explaining sobriety does not equal abstinence always. Sobriety doesn't have to be dry, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of going more into those things.
I mean, that's kind of new information to me. What do you mean by that? Yeah, let's stop there.
So sobriety has less to do with the avoidance of alcohol than it does actually looking into the whys and what you're actually trying to get from being in a different state of mind. In this case, or in my case, I should say, a numbing state of mind. And that was either I found out I was doing to tolerate people more. It wasn't necessarily to make myself more fun or more of a life of a party. It's because I didn't want to be around certain people and I was kind of forcing myself to, or environments too. That's one. But ultimately, what I always wanted, which I can speak for the entire human race, is connection. We all just want connection. And I just had equated drinking to getting a little bit of what I thought was genuine connection. Because in my mind, I thought, well, when people drink, they're uninhibited and they let go more and they're more open. So whatever you're showing me is your true self and whatever I'm showing you is my true self. And this is
there is a certain bond that occurs. Yeah.
If you remember it. And I just wasn't... It just wasn't leading to any deeper connection. That's what I realized. And now I just really focus on connecting in different ways with people like this. I like to listen to other people's ways of life. It has little to do with how much anyone might drink or not or what they do. I just want to know what they're about, and I'm genuinely interested in humans and human behavior, because I'd argue you are able to find something in common and a connection with any human out there if you just listen to a little bit of what they have to say.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. If you're watching this episode on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@MotoDBerryPodcast, please hit the subscribe button. And I hope you're all subscribed to the newsletter from MotoDBerry magazine, where I help curate delicious writing on drinks and dialect. Sign up for free at MotoDBerry.com. Abe, do you have a local saying to share with us?
Well, local could be New York or where I grew up. I grew up between Laredo, Texas and Guadalajara, Mexico. I was thinking about something maybe drinking or alcohol related. There's this word, pedo, which on its own means fart. But I love the Spanish language just because depending on inflection alone, let alone context, you can change the meaning of a word. And honestly, I think about it as like taking a grape and growing it everywhere or anywhere in the world. And, it retains its identity, but it captures different characteristics of the place, etc. So in any case, this is, depending on the context.
Oh, you're bringing my two ideas together.
There we go.
That's so beautifully, the terroir of language.
Yeah, all of it. You could say que pedo, which is what's up. You can say ni pedo, which is, too bad. Pedo, to be drunk. It's something you are. There's so many,
like
many.
Estás pedo.
Estás pedo? Yeah, or you're stating it, estás pedo. You need to go home.
How would you even translate that?
Yeah, exactly. And I love doing that. There's so many phrases like that in Spanish that make no sense if you translate them literally. But yeah, that's just buen pedo. Like it can be good or bad depending on the context. And that's not unlike alcohol and wine and the industry. Depending on the context and the lens that you have in front of it is what it is to you. That really is why it's such a personal choice, and it's not about telling anyone how to do anything. It's just presenting what you're doing, because I know that when I was entertaining the idea of staying in the industry while becoming sober, I was frantically looking for @SoberSommelier, #sober in hospitality, #sober bartender, just anyone in the industry that might have been doing it already. I found a few, but not too many, understandably so, because not everyone wants to be public about it. I found this, Tim Haney, I think he's a master of wine. I'm not sure, master sommelier, something like that. But I read an article where he had quit after achieving that certification. So it was really tough for me to find someone who was actively, pursuing something, a certification, whatever the case may be.
So I wasn't crazy. Nobody was talking about it.
No. Just because someone is not outwardly visible does not mean they don't exist.
Yeah.
And that goes for anything, And it's true. I know that because I opened that account like on my 100th day, so like 4 years ago. Over those 4 years, I've had so many people DM me, winemakers, sommeliers. I would have never even thought to think, oh, I wonder what their habits are. It's just, it's almost surprising how many people are actively pursuing or choosing sobriety while working with it. It's kind of validating in a way. So if I was able to present anything to them, hopefully with that account, which is the whole purpose of it, then I'm getting benefit from that feedback loop.
Thank you for changing that conversation.
Well, one person out of that. There's so many people doing it.
But somebody has to break the ice. It would have been a lot simpler to just market Moto di Bari as a wine account because that's like the biggest area of my expertise. But I knew I wanted to cover cocktails also, but I wanted to cover global cultures, a lot in Italy, a lot in New York, but not just there. There's whole places in the world where alcohol isn't that big of a part of the culture, or just people where alcohol is a huge part of the culture, but not a part of their life. And I wanted everybody to feel included. So I said drinks.
Yeah, it's I was very much welcomed in that you called it transition, which it was, from not drinking back into the job market. I started back because it was in the middle of COVID. So I started back as a service manager. So I didn't really touch alcohol or wine or anything. And then slowly I started tasting again, but I was immersed in it. I didn't want to be scared of a substance forever. So I was like, bring it on. It's not even about testing myself. If this is triggering me, okay, what is it? It's not the drink. It's not the drink itself. What is it that's triggering me? And a lot of the times it was uncomfortability, not just in the space, but with myself. That's really where everything just started to make sense. You just have to like yourself. There's no other option. You have to like yourself.
Thinking about dry January, a lot of times when I worked as a bartender, so you're really a therapist, whatever angst people would have, I would suggest go on vacation by yourself. The other aspect of that kind of life-changing trip was I was doing a fun trip by myself. But we all have a rut that sometimes a little solo travel can really help you hear your own voice. And then that's how I feel about dry January. And that's what dry January was for me, was a chance to be like, am I happy with the way that I'm doing things? What are your feelings about dry January? There's a lot of marketing around it, a lot of opinions. Talk to me about dry January. What's on your mind about that?
We live in a capitalist society, so everything is going to turn into consumerism. Everything's going to get marketed eventually. But if you look at the root of it and dig in a little bit, people have asked me this before, and I think there's huge value in something like dry January, especially the way it's perceived now as a more communal thing. People in the wine business might be scared at how much they're seeing it, I don't know, call it movement, whatever it is, the movement grow. But it's not even a movement. It's just people are feeling, I think, more comfortable in an otherwise isolating thing, like you said. It can be really lonely. Then shame might dig through. I think it was Brene Brown in a tech talk or something. Shame only works when you're alone, something along those lines. That's why it's gained such prominence, I think. And for that reason, for the community, which is what the wine business is supposed to be all about, and supporting each other, it has to be holistic. You have to support each other in whatever thing you're doing in the moment. It's only a moment, a pause, a trip, if you will, to rethink and just kind of check in. How can you check in if you're not clear-minded and present to make those decisions? And if you take that pause and you think, oh, I actually have no issue at all, great. If you do, then but not to a certain degree where you have to quit altogether, then you're becoming a sustainable part of the wine economy, because then you will hopefully be able to drink moderately for life. Even myself, I don't ingest alcohol, but I'm actively purchasing wine, and actively purchasing, whether it's for blind tasting or parties or whatever it is. So it's not about shunning people.
I think I personally feel that dry January is a lot smaller threat to the world of wine than snobbery, outdated marketing, exclusivity, elitism. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of things we can work on. I feel like there were a lot of op-eds around January last year where people were like, oh, it's the end of civilization. Mostly I was worried because I felt that there was this thing, it's kind of like when someone becomes a vegetarian or something. I was listening to an old interview with Anthony Bourdain talking about vegetarians, and he was famously like, like, did not like that. I think we've realized now that vegetarians existing are not going to like put an end to
demolish the meat
into
market
the beautiful traditional sausages of Italy or something. Like, having this reaction to people who aren't drinking even for a month as like being censorious or raining on everybody's parade or something like that.
Self-righteous is the word
and I was
that
just
was
like,
used.
to me, it came off as like, I don't know who's doing the hectoring here, but if people have dropped out of being an alcohol consumer, I don't think you're going to get them back. I saw a panel at Venezia. It was like neo-prohibitionism and the threat to the industry. And like, okay, outrage, it gets a lot of clicks, and then more of those articles get written. There was one in the New York Times that was really weird.
I roll my eyes at all of those words and phrases.
But then you did a talk with Karen.
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts about doing that interview together and your thoughts on neo-prohibitionism, the threat to the civilization of wine.
I wanted to do it because it was positioned to me as the Come Over October is a campaign, bringing people together in whatever way
this was kind of Karen
that
McNeil's
works to
response to
wine
as socialization and that part of it, which is
Karen McNeil's and Gino Colangelo. I was working at Colangelo at that time.
Oh, interesting. So Karen McNeil, by the way, is the author of The Wine Bible, possibly my favorite wine textbook ever. And Colangelo is a marketing agency
a
for
PR agency for food and beverage.
Yeah.
It was presented to me, and I thought it was a great idea to things are already coexisting, so it's just presenting it as such.
Which things are coexisting?
Well, everything, but in this case, sobriety and alcohol consumers. It's just, we're all, whether they're vocal about it or not, everyone is coexisting. Yeah. I'll still celebrate Come Over October because I'll be hanging out with friends, and as long as the wine isn't the main focus, it's just being around your people. Yeah, there will be wine around, and you'll be together. You'll be going. To me, that was it, right? And they kind of changed the tune to more moderation. So I was like, great. I felt like it went through different transitions of the anti-neo-prohibitionist to more, okay, Come Over October, drink in moderation sort of thing, because you're not going to win with the health take on either side. There's no winning there, right? And there are too many variables. Anyway, I saw that coming to the conversation, and I think people know what they're in for, and they don't need to be preached about the health benefits or lack thereof. People know. People are smarter than the wine industry thinks.
And I'm not saying that being puritanical does not exist. It's really weird to, I'm not sure who's doing this exactly, but to give like somebody like Sam Bale, who's kind of like let's have more delicious non-alcoholic beverages. I wouldn't want to give like an influencer in that space flack for threatening the wine industry or something. In fact, I view having fun with Dry January, having more high quality non-alcoholic beverages available, a wider range of conversations around sobriety or whatever that means, as a really nice corrective to the way that, I mean, I'm talking about American culture, but I feel like the way that we've dealt with anyone who has any issue with substances, whether you want to call it an addiction or not, has just been tremendous amounts of shame. Yeah, just kind of the emotional mechanics of degrading people where the scapegoat becomes the addict. I think it's really good if people can have open conversations about that.
Yeah, and you should. That's another perspective that I believe we benefit hugely from changing, because you don't have to hit rock bottom either to make a change. If you're talking about sober people, especially in Dry January, putting at risk any sales or revenue, I have friends who will invite me and they will pick a restaurant or bar based on their non-alcoholic options. I don't care. I'm fine with seltzer because I'm there to hang out with my friends and good music, the atmosphere. If they don't see enough offering for me, they would pick a different place. And now the restaurant is losing on 2, 3, 4 people that would have potentially brought in however much money of revenue that night. And not just at one time. We won't go back there because we already know that there's no non-alcoholic offerings. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to
I
get
think
to?
coming back to vegetarianism for a second, and of course it's obviously possible to be a no fun, preachy, self-righteous vegetarian, right? But at the same time, did the conversation, let's all eat more vegetables, really hurt anything? I mean, did it hurt an industry? I mean, now you're seeing entire high-level tasting menus. The whole restaurant's vegetarian. And that used to be so weird.
Indian, Chicago, I was just there. Yeah. Michelin star tasting menu. They have separate menus, vegetarian, pescatarian, and I forget what they call the meat option. And for their pairing menu, they had a non-alcoholic pairing menu. So they're really thinking of it all in advance, making it feel like you're expected.
Yeah.
They expect to accommodate. It doesn't take too much. That's the thing. I think people see it as this whole like, oh, well, now I have to create this whole thing. No. Also, most people, and not just sober people, just vegetarian people, I have friends that I go out with that don't eat seafood. They don't make it my problem.
Right.
If they share, they're like, oh, I'll share this, and then order whatever you want, and I'll order whatever I want. They're not making it your problem because they know it's a personal choice.
I just want to say to the industry people, chill out on some of these sober influencers. Really, all that person wants is like, when I go out to a bar, could there be a non-alcoholic cocktail for me that's not a glass of apple juice? Like I'm an 8-year-old. And they're really asking for something so small. And on the health news, we kind of talked about it, but other people may not be following this as closely as we were. I do just want to say, with the World Health Organization, I think that the alcohol industry has done a really bad job in how we've reacted to that and how we've positioned ourselves. And so I just want to say that the way that I interpret that study in a nutshell is there was something called the J-shaped curve. I mean, you can look it all up, but that thing where it was good for your heart to drink red wine, or people said there was a certain, 1 to 2 drinks for men or 1 drink for women. Someone did a retrospective study and they realized that in the past, when they had compared people who don't drink at all to people who drink a little bit, that was not a good comparison. And they found that the light drinkers were healthier. It was because the people who didn't drink at all, a lot of them already had stopped drinking because they had a health issue. And so that was it. In light of that study, the World Health Organization, the spin was no amount of alcohol is safe. And the reaction was so 1 drop will kill you. And people were like, oh, it's so overblown. But what really happened, the way that I saw it, was this health organization no longer felt comfortable choosing an amount to recommend that people drink. We've known that drinking too much alcohol can cause cancer since the 80s. That is not news. And people who are marketing alcohol, it's not a health food. We know this, right? Yeah. And I don't want to gloss over the health problems that, drinking too much can cause, but that was it. Just the WHO was like, we no longer feel comfortable recommending that people have 1 to 2 drinks a day. We're getting rid of that wisdom. And sorry, the antioxidant thing, you don't get that anymore. You don't get, red wine lost its health halo. I feel like there was this kind of straw man overreaction.
Yeah.
That I think, but if you're sitting there and you're worried, because there are threats to the wine industry in terms of economics and all kinds of other things, worry more about climate change than the J-shaped curve, and just chill out about it. That's my advice. You're going to be fine.
Yeah. Everyone knows exactly what they need and what's messing them up in their daily life. And if that happens to be, again, with chips or wine or gluten or something, you modify it and that's it. Focus on being the best person you can be so that you can be physically, mentally, and emotionally available as a resource to help the bigger causes.
Speaking of community, I'm so happy to hear about your work making English as a second language classes available for hospitality workers with the group Corporate Para Latinos. Tell us more about your work with them.
So that's a nonprofit that started, we just turned 3. And my sister started it before it was even a nonprofit. She worked at KPMG, one of the big 4. And she, as you can imagine, she was always one of the only brown women in any environment in that company. So she just posted a TikTok asking if there were any other girlies out there looking to just hang out and socialize and just share experiences. And you can imagine how that evolved into something something bigger. And she had always had this want to pay it forward, especially coming from our dad, is very much of the mentality of, if it was hard for me, it has to be harder for everyone behind me because they have to pay their dues. And we're of the opposite. Like everything we do is to prove that wrong. Because if you make it easier, one, it's impossible to make it fully easy. So that's not even something we can achieve. But make it just a little easier. Then you start elevating more and more as you elevate yourself. It's really an uplifting of a community, not just a person.
Tell me about these classes.
I find that I want to teach wine in Spanish and I want to do all those things. But the very first barrier to entry to even opening up someone's mind to other possibilities or choice is the English language. A lot of these people, and we focus again on hospitality workers, come here not knowing a lick of English, and they think, well, with the language barrier, this is the only job that I'm suited for, that I can do. So by eliminating that, you already open up 5 other ladders that they can climb if they want to. Choice. And that's what we do. Not a single one of us as volunteers are certified teachers, professors, etc. But I find it really curious that, I'll listen in on someone teaching and we use a lot of the same examples or we follow similar paths. And I think it's because of that shared experience.
Honestly, my favorite way to learn language is to just sit with somebody in a cafe with a notebook.
Yeah, and you just converse.
Trade. Yeah.
It's incredible because, we have a syllabus and we've gotten to the point where we're a lot more structured. But a lot of the times I just show up and once you build that consistency, I think what makes us really special is that one-on-one interaction and consistent person to person. So you build that trust and openness. I've been teaching for 2.5 years and there's this one specific student I've had that it took over a year for him to even be a little comfortable saying anything in English. And once it started, it was just it's the most gratifying thing.
So if someone wants to take one of these classes, how do they find out about it?
We found too that in keeping it more focused, in this case, geared towards hospitality workers, it started garnering more attention, and especially because I'm part of the hospitality industry, etc. But it really is open to anyone who wants to take them. So we can be found on our website, corporatebetalatinos.org. You can DM me on my Sober Som account, at corporatebetalatinos on Instagram. Anyone who's looking to join us or know someone that wants to either volunteer or learn English, please,
So speaking of looking ahead to creating the world that we envision, what if there were more wine education in Spanish? How might that have changed your wine vocabulary? Because you had to learn English in order to take those tests.
Yeah, I worked at Corpus Chelsea Market for a while and very tourist heavy. So a lot of Spanish there. And I found that I was having trouble, finding words for nutty tannins, body. I know how to say body, but I didn't know if it was a different word or medium full, etc. And so I had to go back and relearn all of these things in Spanish. Yeah, I saw an opportunity to at some point lean into it. I've been speaking of Corkbus, Amber Rill, wonderful human and one of the smartest wine people out there. She created this presentation that I still need to look over. But to get that started and just have it available. It's not looking to make money necessarily. It's just like, I want to offer people resources and options for them to take if they want.
Maybe there could be a moment when you don't have to learn English first before considering a wine career in New York City.
Exactly.
Which is such a diverse place. I look forward to that day. I guess this is as good a moment as any to announce that I'm starting a Spanish podcast. I've been wanting to for a long time because actually I had someone tell me there should be more wine education in Spanish. And I thought I hadn't seen it before. And then I couldn't stop seeing it. Modo de Iberia Español is going to launch in 2025.
That's awesome.
And so we're actually going to record an interview in Spanish after this. And that will air once Modo de Iberia Español launches. The place where we did that news interview was Contento Restaurant, your most recent sommelier gig. I want to talk about how they unfortunately closed and of course ask you about your next steps because I believe you're on the job market right now. But first, I just want to talk about how this was such a lovely restaurant that was really committed to inclusivity, both for diners and workers with different kinds of disabilities. And I wanted to ask you about how your work as a sober som generally ties into the work of inclusivity.
So this place, Contento, was really special, mostly because of the people that are behind it. What got the most attention, rightfully so, is its welcoming nature towards the disability community because of the more obvious things like a lowered bar, higher tables for wheelchair users to just be able to comfortably enjoy dinner, adaptive silverware, braille menu, etc., etc., etc. But more than what we had to offer, it was about creating a barrier-free space where people could just come in as they are because, okay, yeah, there's a category of wheelchair user, but depending on your injury, you might have different needs. There's a manual wheelchair and there's a power wheelchair, different needs for those two things already. So it was just like, come in, tell us how we can accommodate and make this as comfortable as we can, and we'll figure it out in this tiny space in East Harlem. And I think through the very end, through closing, that was it. That was what we led with. I like how impactful it's been to me in terms of becoming barrier-free myself, hopefully, as a person. The way I talk to now, being in the job market, to these other business owners who bring it up. You know, they're like, yeah, I think about this and that and that. And that's the impact that I like to see. It's, yes, the space will be gone and, you know, is one of a kind and a pioneer in that sense of inclusivity. But the impact has been made, and I hope that people take from that to just make things a little better, more open.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would think you're somebody in the wine industry who's looking at people making more non-alcoholic wine or talking about having more non-alcoholic cocktail stuff on restaurant menus. Maybe instead of thinking, oh no, how is this going to affect my market share? Think about how maybe one day you're going to have surgery or something and you can't drink for a week. And won't you be glad that you can have a glass of wine that doesn't taste like crap?
Because you still want to celebrate your daughter's birthday or friend's job promotion, whatever it is.
Maybe you don't have a problem, but maybe there's somebody in your life who needs, you know, shame-free, evidence-based addiction treatment.
I think of
if that's out there and like things are evidence-based, is that really gonna hurt?
Yeah, it's exactly. It doesn't take away from anything. If anything, it adds. Because again, it's welcoming that, yes, catering to that one specific person, but think of everyone else who's joining or who's around them and their people.
I was watching you get interviewed and listening to you talk to the news, and you said you painted this picture of everyone has this glass and they're doing a toast, right? And you can have a glass that looks like everyone else's glass, and what's in your glass looks like whatever is in everybody else's glass. Instead, you're like, oh, I have my Coke over here, and you feel really left out. And if you see that person getting treated well, even though they need and want something different from the other people at the table, doesn't that open the door for you to feel like you might get accepted too?
Yes, and also I want my loved ones to be treated well. So I'm not going to go somewhere where they get treated like, you know,
right.
Or they're just an afterthought for something that they need. Yeah. It's not necessarily, you know, it's not always a choice either. And I'm very conscious of the fact that I live in New York and it's still very much a bubble. So that's not the case everywhere else, which is why I try to lean in even more. Because I also understand that people look to New York as an aspirational place of sorts. So if they look at all of these things that are doing well and being lauded in New York, then okay, they might start making the changes that need to be made.
So open the door, chill out about dry January.
Chill out.
Focus on what you can do to achieve your goals for your life, for your work, and for making people feel loved and
cared for. And if you work in the industry, your whole job is to be a hospitalian, to accommodate and welcome people, to host. I came to your place, you offered me water, coffee, something else that I don't remember, and I said, I'll take this. Thank you so much. Yeah. Done. That's it. No conversation. And it's just the way to welcome someone into your space, I think. And I would do the exact same for you.
So for people who have someone kind of newly sober in their life, or who meet someone who says, I don't drink, how can they respond in a way that makes you feel like, oh, this person's going to be chill?
You know, if someone tells me, what do you need? Or what do you, that's it. Asking the question, what would make this better? John Mulaney has a really funny skit about mayo. It's like, so you don't eat mayo? Did you have a problem eating mayo? And I was like, no one asks those questions about anything else.
You know, I think it was for me, I had a house party and someone came to my party and said, I don't drink, and I didn't know that. And I thought, oh, I don't have anything for them. So I got this idea of like special drinks for everyone. Everyone deserves a special drink. And like from that moment, every time I had a party,
Like I would make a punch that you could spike on the side, or I would always have something that looked great. It wasn't like the second tier
Yeah.
option.
My sister and I were hanging out the other day, and then she wanted to take a breather. So she had a glass of non-alcoholic and then went back to a cocktail with alcohol in it. It's just different needs, different options to make. Because what did she want? She wanted to be around for a longer period of time hanging out. Had she taken that cocktail right away, maybe she would have had to go home or just end it short. So that's it. Again, going back to connection and what can we offer to enhance the possibility of connection.
Abe, how can people follow you on the internet? Can you spell your Instagram handle? Let us know your websites again.
I'm on Instagram at sober_som. Som is SOMM. You can find out about the nonprofit at corporateperolatinos.org. It's like corporatebutLatinos.org. Wine on Wheels, very important.
Oh, yes.
Too. Wineonwheels.org. That was created by Yannick Benjamin, part owner of Contento, a wheelchair user himself. So he has a great story in every way. But specifically having a disability while he was making his way up the ladder of the hospitality industry. Lots of stories there if you ever get a chance to chat with him about that. Wine on Wheels, we do a grand annual wine tasting where 40 plus tables, each one representing a restaurant or bar around New York City. They bring their own donated beverages to highlight their program. They donate their time, their resources, and they're there to just pay it forward to a bigger cause. So any money that we fundraise goes towards other people doing the work for the disability community or marginalized communities outside of that too. Go to the website and they're cool things. Yeah.
Abe, last question. So Contento closed last week, the time as we're recording this. You're looking for a job, but I just want to ask you, like, in a perfect world, like, what's your dream? What do you see happening for you?
I used to think work in your passion, but no, I think there should be a separation. For instance, Corporate Better Latinos, if we ever got to a point where, I could get a salary from it, I still wouldn't, I want to keep it like my time to volunteer and pay it forward. Yeah. I mean, I say that now, I don't know. But with wine, it's just, it's more about the people around it. I know that line gets thrown out a lot and it sounds corny almost, but my perfect job is a job where people inspire me with their purpose, even if it's different from mine. Like, I just like to see people pursuing something bigger than themselves. That makes me want to work harder and do more.
Well, if you want to hire Abe, if he hasn't been snapped up by the time this interview airs, I know you're going to get out of here and go to a job interview in a little bit. You know how to get in touch with him. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
To our listeners, thank you so much for being here. Wherever you go and whatever you like to drink, always remember to enjoy your life and to never stop learning. Support us on Patreon. Grab the newsletter at motodberry.com and subscribe to the YouTube channel at MotoDberry to watch the travel show MotoDberry TV. Music for the show was composed by Ercilia Prosperi for the band Oh. Purchase their music at the link in the notes.